Your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show is streaming to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. My guest in this segment of the morning show is Susan Houston with Willow Tree Missions in Piatt County. Good morning, Susan. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Seth. Good morning, everybody.
Well, thank you for making time for us. And Susan, we're going to talk this morning about kids and domestic violence, and not necessarily kids that are abusers or anything of that nature, but maybe the experiences and how they shape a child's future experiences. Talk to us about this. Give us kind of the top layer, and we'll dive into it from there.
Sure. So we before we get started, Seth, I want to do a shout out real fast. As you all know, or probably have heard, that we are renovating our building, and we have had a pretty significant donation on behalf of Dubson Heating and Air out of Monticello, Train, the air conditioner manufacturer, Ameren Illinois Energy Assistance Programs, and Custom Service Cranes. They are providing us with a good portion of our HVAC systems for our new building, and we cannot be more excited about that. So that will help us continue our programs. And so before we kind of dive into the hard stuff, and before I forget, I wanted to make sure that we gave a shout out to those organizations.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm sure that goes a long way. You know, every little bit helps, but when you get big contributions like that, that's just it's got to be real exciting.
Yes, we're very excited. So, but to get back to your question, so what we talk about when we start talking about children is how they are impacted, how they are being impacted in domestic violence. So I want to start with a subject that's kind of a little bit of a buzzword these days, or it's starting to become one, and it's the word ACEs, ACES. And what that stands for is Adverse Childhood Experiences. There is information out on the CDC websites. There's starting to be more and more information about it out there. And also, it kind of goes in combination with another buzzword is trauma-informed care. Mm-hmm. So a lot of medical healthcare organizations and physicians, EMTs, law enforcement, attorneys, we're all starting to hear this more and more of these ACEs, these adverse childhood experiences, and how they are truly impacting the health and the economics and just everything that happens in our adult world. Mm-hmm. And as the name says, the adverse childhood experience, it starts in childhood. So if I took a survey and asked, so let's talk about what this looks like. So the ACEs we're talking about, and this gets a little heavy, so I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
But we're talking about if you were abused in some way, physical, sexual, emotional, if you were neglected physically or emotionally, was there mental illness in your household, either diagnosed or undiagnosed? Did you have divorce in your household? Was there substance abuse problems, whether it be one family member or all your family members? Violence against somebody in your household, whether that was your parents or your siblings, or maybe it was grandparents. Or sometimes it's even if somebody in your household was incarcerated, suddenly there was an incident of some sort and the person is being hauled off to jail, and you don't know what happened, or you don't have any idea. You just remember that you have that image in your mind of this person being hauled off. So all of those are considered types of kind of these adverse childhood experiences. And if I were to take a survey and ask how many of us as adults have had these, it would be somewhere around the range of probably 60% of adults survey. So the CDC says about 61% surveyed across 25 states reported they had at least some of these. So a lot of people have a lot of them. So what doctors are starting to say are, okay, how many of what is your ACEs score? You know, have you had 3 of these? Have you had 5 of these? Have you had 8 of these? So how that comes back around is in your adult life, you suddenly have a lot of health problems. You've been a substance abuser for many years. You have maybe this whole gamut of toxic stress type stuff. Like toxic stress can contribute to brain development, immune systems, stress response systems. So imagine as a child, you've had these adverse experiences in whatever way, and you continue to have those throughout your life, and it just builds and builds and builds, and your body suddenly can't get away from it, and your brain doesn't get away from it. So you're maybe have a lot of anxiety and you don't even know why. You know, we talk about children in the birth to 2-year age range, and I don't know how many times in the domestic violence program we have those that have been impacted families come in and say the child was asleep, or they weren't in the room,
right?
Or they were in
yeah.
they were in the other room.
They think they're isolated from what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reality is we're learning that this is how it's impacting them. So it may not be happening to them, but they're seeing it, they're hearing it, and maybe it's just this constant trigger for them later in life that they don't know where that's coming from. So especially in the younger, so the critical period of development is 0 to 5 years of age.
Right.
And even if it's not happening directly to them, if they're in the presence of it in some way, and there's just a lot of yelling or, you know, abuse happening within that time period, then it is truly impacting them. So children that grow up with this toxic sort of stress, and they then grow up to have unhealthy relationships themselves.
Right.
They don't have the stable relationships. They are more susceptible to substance abuse because they're constantly trying to deal with something they may not even remember or know why they're having these responses. But they just know that something's off with them, and they just are constantly trying to combat the hurtful or the pain or the deep-seated toxicity that they may or may not know exists. So,
yeah. It's interesting how you know things we experience as a child kind of form what, you know, how we behave as adults and you know our habits as adults even.
Right. And you know, and it's not our fault. It's, you know, it's oftentimes we're just there, you know, we're just living, we're just surviving, right? And these things are happening around us, but they're impacting us in such dramatic ways. And we're finally starting to recognize that in the different areas, like the healthcare area, in mental health, and even law enforcement. I was recently at a meeting with law enforcement officers and attorneys and legal advocates, and just talking about this exact thing, and, you know, recognizing that maybe there's some other ways of approaching how to help people.
Right.
So,
well, and I'll tell you what, Susan, let's take a time out, and when we come back, maybe we can dive into, you know, dive more into those experiences we have as kids or young people, and particularly those that have experienced trauma, abuse, you know, things of that nature. maybe what that could lead to as adults and how we maybe can redirect our course in life and such. In the meantime, where do folks go to learn about all things Willow Tree Missions?
You can go to our Facebook page at Willow Tree Missions, or you can go to willowtreemissions.org.
That is Susan Houston. She is with Willow Tree Missions in Piatt County. Our guest, more to come with her on the morning show.
WHOW. Illinois Ag Better. Let's check the markets now on the RFD Radio Network. I'm Jim Taylor. Corn, beans, and all trading lower at this hour. December corn, 683.5, down 14 1/4. March corn down 13 3/4, 688 3/4. May corn 688 3/4, down 13. November beans 14.29, down 6 3/4. January beans down 5 1/4. 14.42.5. March beans 14.50.5, down 3 3/4. December wheat 8.44 3/4, down 57 3/4. March wheat down 55.5, 8.63.5. December bean meal 424.70, down a dime. December bean oil 74.38, up $1.01. In the livestock market, November feeders 179.10, up 217. December live cattle down 12 cents, 151.82. December lean hogs 84.20. That's down $1. Energy market, December crude oil 88.10, down 27 cents. Jim Taylor, RFD Radio Network.
CEO Paul Scarin here from Warner Hospital and Health Services in Clinton. Our trained physical therapists offer quality, compassionate care close to home. Find out more by clicking our icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
When it comes to fire and water restoration, ServPro of Piatt DeWitt counties is the leader in cleaning, restoration, and construction. Find out all the services they provide by clicking their icon at DeWittDailyNews.com.
Life is uncertain. Stop in and see me, State Farm Agent Jason France, on the west side of the Clinton Square, or click our icon at DeWittDailyNews.com and see how our full lineup of State Farm insurance and financial services can help protect your family.
Local farm broadcaster Jared White covers the local agriculture news you need to know. Hear his reports by downloading the free WHOW mobile app.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Once again, a good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHW Morning Show is streaming to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. Susan Houston with Willow Tree Missions in Piatt County is my guest on the phone for this segment. And Susan, we were talking about the things that we go through as kids and how formational it can be in our, in our adulthoods, our mindsets, our mental and emotional health, but it also forms how we behave, how we act. It forms how we approach relationships and all those things. Talk a little bit about that side of it, as adults. What does that look like when an adult who has experienced trauma as a kid, what does that look like in their adult years sometimes?
Absolutely. So growing up in this toxic stress environment is you're probably going to have difficulty forming healthy and stable relationships, and how that impacts you as an adult. Not only just the toxic stress part and the anxieties and those sorts of things, but if you have never had a healthy relationship, then that's going to impact how every other relationship in your life is going to look. And it could be a lot of children or people, adults who have had adverse childhood experiences, they have unstable work histories. Well, why? Well, because they can't have healthy relationships. They don't understand them. They don't understand how to act, right? So they're not able to have a stable work history if you don't have an ability to have healthy and stable adult relationships.
Right.
They struggle with finances, jobs, depression, and all of those kind of go together. If a lot of times with depression, you have a lot of motivation issues, right? So if you're having motivation issues, then it's really hard to go have a job, the stability in the job as well. And then you're going to struggle with finances.
Right.
So it all kind of goes hand in hand. as you go on.
Mm-hmm.
So just some of the, prevention tip for the ACEs is understanding and that social emotional learning of safe dating and healthy relationship skills.
Mm-hmm.
Having those skills and being able to talk about your traumas as a child will help you as an adult. And if you've never had the opportunity to be helped as a child, then as an adult you can still be helped. There's lots of therapy and counseling, and a lot of people shy away from that, and they're like, no, I'm never going to counseling, and it's in the past, I'm not going to ever deal with it. But yet they have a substance abuse problem, or they have a problem, with a lot of triggers.
Mm-hmm.
So, getting the help that you need is possible. And, tomorrow's a new day. Every day is a new day and a new opportunity to make changes in your life. So if all of a sudden this is a realization like, oh, I am one of those 60% of people that have at least one adverse childhood experience, then, there is still hope for me. And there's always hope.
Sure.
And I just want to instill that it's not your fault. There's lots and lots of therapies available. There's also, talking to your doctor about it and saying, hey, I'm realizing now that maybe some of my stress is coming from this. How do I get help?
Mm-hmm.
So just being able to talk about it is a good way of starting.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Well, and to that end, Susan, you talk about someone that doesn't want the help. They say, I don't need help. This was in the past. I'm fine. I'm not going to deal with it. Blah blah blah.
Right.
The for a lot of people though, that denial could be from a place of, well, this isn't really that bad, like this was,
Right.
The trauma, the quote, they probably mock the word trauma or things that their experience was like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, that's just, that was just how it was, maybe different time, something of that nature, well, maybe a lot of people dismiss it, or they just don't even think it was, an issue altogether. How about those kind of dynamics?
Sure. We see that a lot in, particularly in neglect and verbal abuse situations. So people often think just because it's not violent, then it wasn't abuse. Well, verbal is abuse. You can be very, very traumatized by a lot of verbal abuse. You're stupid, you're ugly, you're whatever, and you're never going to make it. You're, I don't know why you were born, blah, blah, blah. These are all examples. That's verbal abuse. And even though they may not have, hit you or sexually abused you or, been violent with you, that is abuse. And we see that a lot. And then the other one is emotional and physical neglect. People think, well, this isn't violent. They didn't hurt me. Well, the reality is if you had to kind of grow up on your own and bring up yourself and didn't have a parental figure in some way helping you along the way, then it's possible then you are dealing with some of your anxieties in life because you were neglected as a child. I've read many books about the emotional neglect and that impact and how that impacts adults. And again, people think this isn't violence. I'm fine. I wasn't victimized. When in fact, it was a sort of trauma for you. Not having a parent can be just as traumatic as having an abusive parent.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, no doubt. Well, you mentioned, Susan, folks finding help and those sorts of things. Just highlight that again for us and maybe dive deeper into that a little bit about,
Sure.
the help is out there and all that.
So I'm kind of a little biased on the counseling thing. So, I have counseling in my background, and I'm currently in a graduate program for counseling, so forgive me. But
No, that's fine.
therapy, a lot of therapy. There's groups. When we talk about substance abuse, there's the obvious ones like AA and Al-Anon and those sorts of things. But there's advanced treatments therapies, eye movement. I don't remember exactly what it's called, EMDR therapy and neurofeedback therapy. So what's happening in complex traumas when you have several of these at the same time, it's messing with your neurological systems. And so it's on this kind of perpetual feedback system where you're constantly in the state of, I'm going to be traumatized. So you can't ever get out of that. So the neurofeedback therapy is kind of to help kind of figure out how to kind of destimulate yourself. So
Right.
that's kind of what a lot of those focus on, is how to rethink things, reevaluate your situation. Sometimes just go into yoga or Tai Chi or exercise or some of those, and to get back to kind of a baseline of where am I? And some of it you can do on your own. Absolutely. You know, a lot of self-care. People think that self-care is kind of, well, that's selfish. No, it's not. It's probably one of the best things everybody can do is more self-care.
I've seen a lot of evidence that just exercise is a natural kind of healer for a lot of people. You know, just go on a walk, that sort of thing. It's a lot of, kind of natural remedy. I've seen a lot of that evidence lately. Susan, I hate to do this to you. I got to let you go. How do folks learn more about all things Willow Tree Missions?
So you can visit us on our Facebook page at Willow Tree Missions, or willowtreemissions.org.
Susan Houston with Willow Tree Missions is my guest on the phone here for this morning. Appreciate her time as always. The morning show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Piatt Insurance agent in Clinton. Network News is next.